Welcome to the Wingman Show. My name is Drew Brown, and my wingman, my man, the number one guy I know, Dr. Paul Thompson. What's up, brother? Welcome to the Wingman Show, where we're floating like butterflies and stinging like bees. Rumble, you two badass jet pilots, rumble. Welcome to the Wingman Show. My name is Commander Drew Brown. My wingman, my friend, the guy who watches my six is Dr. Paul Thompson. What's up, brother Paul?
Well, Commander Drew, it's good to see you today. I'm doing very, very well. Your background looks very, very interesting. I don't think you're back home. Looks like you're away somewhere.
I am in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I am on a Virgin Voyage cruise that left Miami going to Barcelona, and it couldn't be more appropriate for the show we're going to have today.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Is that any fish in the water? Can you see any fish?
I'm waiting for a whale to pop up, actually. All right, let's start this puppy up with a quote. The best part of being authentic is that there is no image to maintain. I love that one. One more time. The best part of being authentic is that there is no image to maintain. You know, it takes a little while to grow up and be sure of yourself, but once you do that and you know who you are, you don't have to worry about it. Do you, Paul?
Yeah, you don't have to worry. And actually, you're probably more likely to be in a relaxed state. If you think about it. You're not trying to put on airs or trying to fit into anything necessarily. You can just be yourself, and you don't have to wait to exhale. You can just exhale.
Very good, Doc. You don't have to wait to exhale. Just breathe. Good one. All right. Well, the reason that I'm out here in the middle of the ocean doing this show is that this is part three of Who in the Hell Are the Wingmen Anyway? This part is about two black Navy jet pilots first getting aboard an aircraft carrier and living there. Dr. Paul, let me start off with asking you, what did you think about when you first had to move aboard that carrier, and what was the name of that carrier?
It was really weird. The first one I moved aboard was the USS Saratoga. CV-60s was the designation. It was dismantled some years ago, but that was a very unique experience. It was like a big luxury liner without the luxury. If that makes any sense to
Very
you.
good. Let me ask you this. How did people react when they saw you as a black officer and a black pilot in a very special area of our military?
That was a bit unusual and not. I was getting used to just being there, number one, and they were kind of getting used to just seeing me. And after a while, it sort of faded away. It's kind of a surreal experience because as I remember, two dominant groups. There was the ship's company, which are the people who were attached to the ship, did real ship Navy stuff. Then you had the air wing. That's everyone that had something to do with airplanes. Those are the two groups together they're really separate entities and they're kind of pushed together. So you're looking at all of this stuff and all of the squadrons and all the ship's company. That gives you all the thousands and thousands of people. And they are very, very different groups, even though we all live together. So there's a lot of, I don't know, call there's a lot of cross cultural stuff just from a Navy organizational standpoint, because I just talked about two different entities are on this one big ship with a common mission, and whatever differences they have, they need to iron them out. They have to iron them out very quickly for anything to operate.
Well, do you remember that we used to wear brown shoes and then ship's company would wear black shoes and that's how they could differentiate us?
I was not part of the Brown Shoe Navy. I didn't have brown shoes. Maybe they changed that after you got in there. I'd heard about that.
For you, there were brown shoes, and then they took it away to try to change the uniform, and then when I got in, there were still black shoes until this one day, and they said you can get your brown leather flight jackets again, and we could start wearing brown shoes, and that was a big thing for us.
Okay, okay, yeah, I guess we're in between eras. I got a leather brown leather flight jacket still. I can't get it professionally dry cleaned 'cause they said it'll come apart, so I just take care of it by hand. And I get a like a Nomex fabric one. Yeah, I never had brown shoes.
Well, I have some brown shoes for you, Dr. Paul. All right. Well, tell me, when you got aboard this carrier, how did you find your way around? I mean, there are thousands of men on here. I don't know how many your ship had, but the Nimitz had like 5,000 men. How did you get acclimated to living aboard an aircraft carrier?
That's around 5,000. I think that's a similar number. If it wasn't 5,000, it's probably 4,950 or something like that. Yeah, getting around was interesting. It's easy to get lost. I got lost a lot. So, you know, it just, they had like a different numbering system and a chart. In some aspects, it was as complicated or more complicated than the New York subway system, at least the way they used to have it up there, with the lines and all that stuff. But I knew where I had to go, and after maybe a week or so of doing it, you kind of knew where you had to go. You know where you lived, you knew where the ready room was, which was a long way away. So you basically had to find your path. It's like taking the New York subways. You know how to get from point A to your point A to your point B. You're an expert on that. Everything else, unless you work in the subway, you may not know too well. So the ship was like that too. So I figured it out eventually, and after about a month or so, it's like you lived there all your life.
Well, I was aboard the USS Nimitz, which was a brand new aircraft carrier. Actually, they called them the Nimitz class carriers. It's the largest aircraft carrier in the world when I got aboard it, and it was big. And, I knew where the ready room is, and that's where your squadron meets. I knew where my bunk was, and I had a six-man bunk my first cruise. So six of us lived in a room, and I knew where the bathroom was, and I knew where you could get something to eat. And after that, you start walking around, you start learning about this place. It is huge, like Dr. Paul said. And there are so many levels below where the pilots live. And remember, we said this in a prior show, naval aviators had jobs. So my first job was communications officer. So I actually had a job I had to do during the day other than flying, because my first cruise was 9 months, believe it or not.
Yeah, yeah. We were actually very blessed because there are many people on the ships who don't see the light, literally don't see the light of day. They don't see the light of day, and it may be for days at a time, depending on what they're doing. So the folks on the flight deck, everybody working on the flight deck, does get to get outside. That's a very hazardous place to live, work. Very hazardous place to be. But they do get to get outside and get to see something, breathe fresh air or sea air. They also have to be out there when the weather's really, really bad too. There's another side of it.
Well, they say that the flight deck is the most dangerous job in the world, which I do believe. It is very dangerous up there, like you said. But by us getting to see the light of day, that was really, really cool. And daytime flying was really good around the ship. I mean, if you wanted to fly a jet, that was the place to fly it because there were kind of really no rules once you got away from the carrier.
Yeah, that's pretty much true. Aren't you get about 3, 5 miles away? You're pretty much you're on your own, with respect to your SOP and the rules and things like that. But there's no one holding your hand, no one looking at you, and something bad happened, maybe no one ever find you either.
That's true. What was your job as a naval aviator other than flying your A-7?
Well, very first, I started off as the legal officer, which is probably make a good comedy out of that. I might get with Ryan Coogler, see if we can make a movie out of it. I was that, and I was also the first lieutenant, which was interesting. I wasn't lieutenant. I was, I think I was just barely a JG, but that was someone that was, they called it heads in beds. You're responsible for the living accommodations of the enlisted personnel, which was weird. I knew nothing about any of that stuff. So, okay, you're first lieutenant. Oh, okay, fine. And essentially, if people had problems, they would come to you and you'd work them out with an entity on the ship who you knew nothing about, but you have to go and learn and interact and say, we got this problem. Didn't have too much there. The legal officer stuff was when other enlisted troops would get in some kind of trouble, some kind of difficulty, and you would be working things out with the commanding officer or whoever their officers in charge were with to see what punishment they would get, or does this warrant punishment? Uh, I saw some very interesting things. By today's standards, all that stuff was lightweight, but that was very interesting. I had to go to legal school in Newport, Rhode Island for like 6 weeks, which was actually very nice.
Kidding. Wow. I was communications officer, so I had a super top secret clearance because I got all the comm from DC or wherever they were sending it from. I got all the secretive comm that was going to our commanding officer. But this is mighty funny, Paul, because guess what I was my second job? I was first lieutenant also.
Okay.
And you're right, it was beds and heads. We were in charge of keeping that our area clean and having men do beds and heads. And as far as the head is concerned, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's the bathroom. So
I
when
think,
somebody
I guess we both had, I don't know, we maybe had qualifications if we were part of an administration to be secretaries of housing and urban development.
very true, Paul. Well, when I first got men, I had like 30 to 40 guys under me. I knew nothing about this. But what I did, I heard this a long time ago in the Navy to do this. I relied on my chiefs. Now, there's officers and there was enlisted. A Navy chief is one of the higher enlisted personnel, and they could have been there 15, 16, 20, 25 years. They were master chiefs, there were senior chiefs, and there were regular chiefs. And a lot of officers came in thinking that they knew something because the chief had to salute them, and the chief would just let them flail. But not me. I went to these chiefs and I said, look, you take care of me and I'll take care of you. And they showed me the ropes of how to deal with these men and how to be a good officer, Paul. How about you?
Yeah, they're critical. The chiefs are very important. I leaned on them too and got all kinds of information. The worst thing you could do is walk in there and think you know everything. That's crazy. That's insane. Those people will keep you alive. Basically, the way that the Navy operated when I was there, my time, things were run by chiefs and lieutenants, not by captains there, but chiefs and lieutenants. Senior enlisted in
That's
'03s.
100% true. They ran the Navy, and enlisted personnel are the people who really get down and do the Navy, to be honest with you. Without them, we couldn't fly, we couldn't do anything because they took care of jets when we were up there. They're the ones who directed us where to go, when to go. Let me ask you something funny. Nighttime. Nighttime on the carrier, with there's nothing around, no land around, flying off an aircraft carrier at night was quite interesting and sometimes very scary, Paul.
It could be, and when you get launched off, you have no control. So you're basically a pebble in a slingshot. And at night, oftentimes, whether it was well lit or not lit at all, usually it's not lit at all. Just imagine seeing some lights on the ship, which is not much, and you're shot off the end in about 2 seconds. And essentially, other than your little instrument lights, you're kind of like on the inside of a basketball.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people said that. It's
Yeah.
like getting shot into a basketball. That's how black it is.
Yeah.
And if you remember commander's moons? And for
Yes.
everybody out there who wants to know what a commander's moon is, it's when it's a full moon out there and you can actually see the aircraft carrier at night. But I'll tell you what, and they call it a commander's moon because all of a sudden the senior officers, everybody wants to fly now at night because you had to fly so many nights to be qualified. So a commander's moon, all the top people would start flying, the captain of the ship, anybody who could fly that were high officers would want to fly on those moonlit nights. But I will tell you this, Paul, coming aboard the carrier on a commander's moon was a lot harder for me than coming aboard a carrier black as hell. And the reason is you started looking and peeking and looking at that ship when you were coming in instead of looking at that meatball. When it was black, when it was no lights, the only thing you could look at was that meatball in your lineup. And so you usually had a better landing when there were no lights on. What did you think?
That's true, Jones, because basically the worst thing you could do is becoming a tourist and going on a sightseeing trip when you're trying to land aboard the ship. Your attention needs to be 120% on just the landing stuff itself, and not looking at these things get your attention. So that was consistent, but it was just beautiful to be able to do that. Almost like it seemed like cheating sometimes a little bit. It was just so nice and so pretty. Most of the time, no, you didn't have that much lighting, and it was just a few lights. You line them up, and hopefully you got aboard.
Another good thing about living and flying off that aircraft carrier is we got to practice with live ammunition. We could actually drop real bombs when you're flying off an aircraft carrier for target practice. And that was quite exciting. Another thing is, Paul, do you remember when we used to do joint operations with other countries?
Yes, I was fine. Did a few of those. They were really really good. Um, and very brief, nothing crazy. Did stuff with the called the British, the French, Spanish one time, Italians, just various people in the Med sailing around. They would have different units come out and test you, and be act as enemy air forces. You might do the same thing.
It was very, very exciting to actually fly with other countries and see different jets and get into operations. I'll never forget when we went over by Egypt. I flew over sand for must have been a half hour, and that's 100 miles easy. There was nothing but sand. And you're talking about scary. For some reason, it was scarier than flying over the ocean. It was like if you punched out here, you wouldn't ever get found.
Yeah, yeah. People don't realize, if you haven't been out of a metropolitan area or a crowded place, how much space there is on the earth. There are a lot of vast areas where there's nothing on, at least nothing on the surface. And we've flown over a lot of that. The Gobi Desert's in China. I've flown over many times, and day and night, there's not much out there.
That's very true. And one of the exciting things about being on the aircraft carriers, we got to travel around the world. So we used to get to go into ports. Why don't you tell me about some of the ports you went to and how that felt when you got to get off the ship?
Well, I said, one of my favorite ones was where you're headed to right now, Barcelona. Went there a couple of times. That was nice. No crime problem. Nobody ever snatched any change from me or anything. They were very friendly. Um, sometimes the food was fantastic. The one thing that got me, I guess, the biggest challenge or biggest change was that spent a lot of time in Italy, a lot of time in coming in and out of Naples, and I was looking for some really good Italian food, and I really want some good spaghetti. And the spaghetti was hard, and they called it al dente. I said, "Who? El who? Who's that?" El dente, el dente, el dente. That's how we make it. And it never tastes. It was good. It was good and good for you. But I was still waiting for the soft spaghetti. I never got that, and I wanted my lasagna. Nobody had lasagna. I did find one place in Florence, Italy, that did have lasagna. It was green lasagna. That's all I had. It was okay. It was okay. Now I didn't know that was an Italian American dish.
Yes, that's mostly a lot of the dishes, like especially when we went to China. A lot sweet and sour chicken is an American
Yeah,
dish. It's not
pretty bad.
a Chinese dish. And like you said, lasagna is hard to find. There was great pizza. Now, we used to go a lot to Naples, you did mention. We were with a whole bunch of young men who were 18, 19, 20 years old. They've been on the ship for 6 to 8 weeks. They have all this money because you have no place to spend your checks. And they would go to port, and a lot of them would get drunk and get in trouble.
Yeah.
When we went to Naples, there were certain areas of Naples that you could not go to. And I won't ever forget the ones who got real drunk, they used to put them in a clamshell.
Yes.
Remember the clams when they would strap them down to a gurney and bring them back? And there was once, Paul, I'm not kidding. We'd been out to sea for a very long time, and because we were a nuclear carrier, we couldn't pull in all the time, and we had to get shuttled with a ferry. And this one time, this ferry had alcohol on it that you could buy and drink. It was a regular commercial ferry, and there were guys who went to Italy and never stepped on the sweet earth of Italy because they got so drunk, started a fight, and they had to get clamshell. They never made it to shore. Another thing that tripped me out is a lot of people who really didn't understand international traveling. The first place they would go to is a bar and a McDonald's, no matter what country we were in.
What a waste of a life. When you say clamshell, we started talking, and I thought I said Naples. That's the first image I have of those clamshells. They have like 2 or 3 of them sitting out. I said, "What are those things?" And if for those who don't know, imagine, cooking French fries, French fries in oil, put it in a bucket, a steel thing. But just imagine if the French fries had a top on it. That's essentially what they put these guys in if they were totally uncontrollable. And I'd only seen that like a couple of times. But, wow, a lot of them are 18, 19, or young, and there's not a lot of difference between our ages, even between the officers and the enlisted, not people like me. They're just 2, 3 years younger, and, we're all young people. We're all young ones.
The difference between us and, you couldn't fraternize in the Navy. You weren't supposed to fraternize. In other words, you weren't supposed to get real social with the enlisted. And the reason for that is, even though we were having fun and we were here and we were there, this is about war. And you didn't want to get too friendly with an officer or an enlisted person because, God forbid, some real stuff went down. You don't want somebody saying, "Come on, Drew, you know me." You
Right?
can't have that in the military. And remember, the only difference was that we had a 4-year college degree and they didn't. The only difference between me and them was a college degree. We were the same kind of people, though, and that was really important. And a lot of enlisted people looked up to me and really enjoyed the way that I dealt with them.
Yeah, I always try to be fair with everyone. I had never had any problems. I mean, there is kind of a big kind of a classism thing, I thought, in the Navy at the time. But, they're human beings, nobody's perfect, and realize that sometimes, I got to understand that, boy, you grew up with a lot of advantages that many people never saw, never got a chance, never got to see certain things. And in many ways are actually more talented, but everybody doesn't get the same breaks.
That's true. And, like I said before on the show many a times, me going to college was not a choice. I didn't have a choice. My father did not give me a choice about getting an education. And a lot of these young people, the reason they didn't go to college is that they had a choice. And I always thought it was very, very weird that you give a person at 16, 17, 18 years old the biggest decision they'll ever make at the stupidest part in their life. So that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I quoted you, a couple weeks ago to a cable guy. I had a problem with my internet, and he came over, and he's interested in aviation, and he looked at stuff around the room. We were talking about things, and he said he was interested in it, but he wasn't sure if he liked school, if he should continue. He might have been 20. I said, You've got to do this. You've really got to do this." And I quoted you. You may be making a decision. I didn't insult him, but you may be making a decision at the dumbest point in your life that will affect you forever. So your Commander Drew was quoted about 2 weeks ago, and I gotta listen to it.
Very good. And the reason that it's the dumbest point in your life is because you thought you knew everything.
Right,
The reason that I'm smart now is because I realize I don't know anything.
right.
And I always want to learn. There are so many things out there to learn, but when you're young and dumb, you just think you know it all, and you surely don't. You surely don't. Everybody out there who's listening to us, thank you so much for all of your support. Thank you for watching us on YouTube, listening to us on Apple Podcasts, watching our shorts on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much for your support. We have a website, and that website is wingmenshow.com. That's wingmenshow.com. And on that website, we have a newsletter. And the newsletter this week is Going Back to School as an Adult Part 2, because the last week we did Going Back to School as an Adult. Well, now we're going to find out going back to school and continuing your education on this newsletter. We also have something called the Frequent Flow Line, where you can ask Dr. Paul and myself any question you'd like, and we will try to answer it on the show. Now, I'm on this beautiful ship called the Scarlet Lady in the middle of the ocean right here. And what's really funny is this ship is beautiful. Every nut and bolt on this ship was made for safety and comfort. Yet the ships that Dr. Paul and I used to live on, every nut and bolt was made for war. So it was a big difference between these kind of ships and going across the sea now.
That's good. Yeah. So you are on a luxury liner that is luxurious.
Luxurious liner, great cruise line, Virgin Voyages. We really enjoy it. So tell me this, Paul, have you ever had any problems out there on the carrier?
You mean flying or just with people or
Flying.
flying? Nothing. I say nothing, nothing too major. I had one. My engine was failing one time on my second cruise. I thought I might have to eject. I did not. I was able to get it aboard, and the engine actually failed just as I rolled out, which was interesting. I don't think I would have been able to.
Wow.
That was a bad engine. Uh, by the quality assurance officer had taken that airplane on a test flight the day before, and he certified it as safe to fly. And that was the quality assurance officer. Well, guess who the quality assurance officer was? Me.
You.
Yes. So the airplane I signed off, I flew it the next time, and I barely made it aboard. I barely made it, and that was after having a lot of experience in the airplane. If I was brand new, I don't know if it would have worked out.
I was a det called a detachment, and we were flying live ammunition. And I was lead on a formation flight, and we were full of bombs. I won't forget this. And the guy who's flying behind me, my wingman, said, "You got smoke coming out of your engine." And that is really bad. The one thing is, we're going to show you of an A6 coming aboard an aircraft with bombs. That is AI, because you cannot land on an aircraft carrier if you're still carrying bombs. So what they made me do is they made me drop my bombs in the ocean. And since they didn't have any more smoke, I was able to actually go into Jacksonville, land, and spend the night there. And I had a lot of fun. And when I came back, Paul, I swear to you, I thought I was going to get a medal for the way I handled it.
Mhm.
Instead, I got yelled at for staying a night in Jacksonville and not coming back to the carrier that same day.
Yeah, well, I can see that because of two reasons. One, maybe they wanted to look at the airplane good. But two is maybe they were jealous that you got off the ship and they didn't.
I think it was number two, Paul.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, anybody out there who can hear my voice, anybody out there who can see us on YouTube, I would like to tell you anything that you think is important and anything that you think is beautiful, and most importantly, anything that makes you happy, may you have that today and forever. And I pray for peace.
Pray for peace too, Commander Drew. It's good to see you. You're on the high seas in the ocean, in the middle of nowhere. I hope you have a very, very good time. And again, we appreciate all those who listen, like, and share our message. Give us a like if you're looking on YouTube. It helps the algorithm. We can spread this to more and more people. Keep your chin up and have a good day to everybody.
Thank you once again, Dr. Paul Thompson, my friend. Thank you for your love, your time, and that's something that we won't ever get back. I want to thank all the listeners, too. Thank you so much for doing the show, Dr. Paul. We're jamming.
Well, thank you, Mr. Drew, for inviting me on. Always good to talk to you. And ladies and gentlemen, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast or any of the podcasts. If you're looking at YouTube, they say smash the like button. Don't smash it. Just press it gently and refer to use as a link to all your friends. You can also look at us on our website, wingmenshow.com, WINGMEN show, SHOW.com, altogether, wingmenshow.com. And we hope to see you in the future. Thanks again, Mr. Drew.
Oh, you're welcome. And we're still floating like butterflies and stinging like bees. Rumble, you badass jet pilots, rumble. May there be peace on earth and goodwill towards all men and women.